I would buy it for 175 in one of the best areas that we have in Moncton. And I can rent my 2 bedrooms at the same price that he would rent them for, around 1,200 to 1,300. So we're like, wow, this sounds like really good cash flow. We have to do something about this. And I wanted a place to rent. So instead of renting, Martin and I were like, okay, what if we buy a house together and then you can live in one side and we can rent the other side, and it would cancel out all of our expenses. We don't even need to house hack. You don't need to have roommates. You can just live in your own space.
Hey friends, welcome back to the CarrotCast podcast, where we teach investors and agents how to dominate with evergreen marketing and build businesses of freedom and impact. I'm your host, Brady Winder, and today I have my friends Martin and Lyne with me, some of the top wholesalers on the east side of Canada, and they've hustled their way from house hacking on credit cards to building a big team and really building a really valuable wholesale and real estate investing business. And so this episode is going to be a two-parter because we've got a lot of golden nuggets to cover. In part one, we're going to talk about joint ventures and how to do more JV deals, what that looks like, and then some really creative ways they've found how to build a buyer's list, because they're doing some things that I haven't heard other investors mention before through SEO and through content, just building a buyer's list creatively and easily. So we're going to have a fun conversation, and make sure to stick around to part two, where we're going to be talking about next week. We're going to be talking about some of the marketing tactics they've tried, offline marketing and online, and all the different experiences they've had with a bunch of different marketing channels. And so, yeah, welcome to the podcast. Martin Lyne, how's it going?
Thank you. Well, thank you for having us. We're going great. It's very exciting.
Thank you so much. That's quite a few expectations for us to live up to, but we'll do our best to share our insights and our experiences. Thank you, Brady.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll set a high bar. I think you guys are probably, I don't know, maybe only the second, maybe the first, I'll have to check, but the first guest on the podcast from Canada. Do you know a lot of other people using Carrot in Canada?
We actually do. Some of the people we look up to have been getting started on Carrot, and we kind of stole the idea there when we saw their website powered by Carrot. We're like, oh, okay, let's give that a try and see how it goes. But there's quite a few people using Carrot in Canada.
Absolutely.
Okay, right on. well, let's get into it. Tell me a little bit about y'all have a unique dynamic here as a partnership, and tell me about how you got into real estate and what things are looking like for you right now.
Martin and I have two different stories. I'll let Martin share his. But for me, my dad has always been kind of playing around real estate. Has been flipping for over 10 years. He's bought multiple different types of properties. He's developed some commercial properties in our home country, Algeria. So it kind of was always in the back of my head. And I always knew I wanted to do something with it. I knew it worked really well for my dad, and he was able to support our family with that. So I knew I was going to do something like that. Didn't know the extent of my implication in real estate until today. But basically, when I moved to Moncton for school, that's when I realized there's a lot of potential in this market. And then that was at the same time Martin and I met. He was into real estate too. So we decided, okay, we have to do something with this. And that's kind of how everything started for me.
Okay, awesome. So that's a big move from Algeria to Moncton, Canada. And okay. How old are you now, and how long ago was that? Am I missing a key?
Yeah, I feel like I've jumped into time like pretty fast. But basically, I was born and raised in Algeria until I turned 11. I moved to Canada. I moved to Montreal first when I was 11. Spent around 10 years there, and then I met Martin a couple months before I moved to Moncton. I wanted to go to French university, which is why I went to Moncton, and it was one of the only programs in Canada that offers a degree in criminology, which is what I was studying at the time, in French. So that's why I went to Moncton. And Martin and I met a couple months before my move, so that's kind of how things played out. It ended up working out perfectly. It was just everything happened at the right time. But yeah, so I didn't move from Algeria to Moncton. I moved from Algeria to Montreal, which was still quite a big move. And then I decided on my own to go from Montreal to Moncton.
Okay, nice. Okay, and Martin, what's the backstory? How'd you end up here?
Yeah, so honestly, very similar to Lyne as well. I'm also an immigrant. I was born and raised in Beijing, China, and I moved out to North America. Actually, I moved to Minnesota first when I was 14. I went there for high school, and then I came up to Montreal, Canada, simply just for college. It's a great town for students. It's also a lot cheaper than American universities. So that's why I went up there. And I stayed there ever since, right? So Essentially with my first job in marketing, I leveraged that to buy my first property. I wanted to buy a brand new condo, brand new development. And then my coworker at the time told me to read this book. As you can imagine, it's Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that got me to look into, okay, maybe I should buy investment property instead. So at the time, my mom and I, as two immigrants, we, bought a duplex together. But in order to live in it and also make a cash flow to cover all of our expenses, we actually rented out room per room. And we even converted the 2 living rooms of the duplex into additional bedrooms, just so me and my mom, we could, get to live there for free. So it was really powerful, for us as two immigrants to Canada to be able to live rent-free, mortgage-free, and have tenants to pay for our expenses. So that was, my first experience really just living that real estate house hacking life. My mom and I were house hacking without even knowing what house hacking meant. We just wanted to pay no bills. That was literally it. Yeah. And then, as Lynn said, we actually met because of house hacking. So one of the tenants that was living with me and my mom wanted to throw a party, and Lynn came to that party. That's literally how we met.
It was very random.
Yeah.
It was in his backyard. I like telling people we met in his backyard. It was just a party there, and I was invited. We used to go to school together, and so I ended up going, and there was an empty seat next to Martin, and then I sat there, and the rest is history.
And you were like such a smart guy, house hacker. You were so inspired by his real estate investing skills. You're like, I have to get to know this guy.
It actually did play a big part. I
thought it was a good looks. I'm just kidding. It's definitely not the good looks.
That night, he actually made me. I had a tour of the property, and I kind of helped him out, by telling him which renovations he should be doing. I learned a lot from my dad in terms of renovation wise. He used to flip houses. We used to live in those flips. Actually, I forgot to mention that, but we would move from flip to another. I gave him a big tour, and I showed him kind of what he should be renovating and changing. And that's how it all started.
Yeah. So everyone else was in the backyard, playing beer pong, playing, whatever flip cup. They thought we're just making out, but no, we're just geeking out on real estate. Lynn was telling me. You're
just in the corner sharing notes about Rich Dad Poor Dad and talking about flips. And
Exactly.
We're the two weirdos. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. That is awesome. I love that. I've lived in a flip before and know the pain of like constantly moving, living in a flip. That's hard. So props to you. And house hacking and living with your mom, renting out, turning your living room into a place that someone can rent out. That's next level. Props to you guys for doing that.
I appreciate that, Brady.
So what did it look like? What's the partnership look like when did you guys go into business together?
Okay, call us reckless, but we met, and then a couple months later, he came to visit me in New Brunswick because I moved to Moncton, probably like 2 or 3 months later. And we realized, as I was looking for rentals, that the price to rent is very, very similar to what you could rent for in Montreal. So the rents are very similar, but the acquisition price, the price of the property, was significantly lower. It's a fraction of the price.
In Moncton?
In Moncton, exactly. So a duplex that my dad would purchase for $850,000 in Montreal in an okay area, I would buy it for $175,000 in one of the best areas that we have in Moncton. And I can rent my 2 bedrooms at the same price that he would rent them for, around $1,200 to $1,300. So we're like, wow, this sounds like really good cash flow. We have to do something about this. And I wanted a place to rent. So instead of renting, Martin and I were like, okay, what if we buy a house together and you can live in one side and we can rent the other side, and they would cancel out all of our expenses. We don't even need to house hack. It's still house hacking, but you don't need to have roommates. You can just live in your own space. Yeah. And then that's what we did. 3 months in the relationship, we're starting to look for houses and starting to try and buy things and pull some cash for the down payment, etc. So that's the story.
I was just gonna say, there's a layer of complication to it. A lot of people were actually seeing exactly what we saw. So on the market, it was extremely competitive. I wish we could just say we went directly with a realtor and put an offer on the first property we saw and we got it. Definitely not the case at all. So everything on the market, is really overpriced already, even for Moncton standards, right? So we were essentially getting all bid left and right, everywhere we looked. We wanted a duplex or a fourplex where we can house hack, live in one of the units and rent out the rest of the property. Everything like that, they have multiple competing offers. So that really pushed us to get more creative with what we can do. So the first property that we bought, it was a little outside of the city. It was actually in a place called St. John, New Brunswick. It turned out to be another great market, so it served us well. We're going to get into a little more later. But we ended up, picking up a pocket listing from a realtor, and that ended up being our first purchase. But, it's because of the frustration that we got from looking in Moncton on the market that pushed us to get, real estate education, that pushed us to, listen to podcasts and really learn about, off-market opportunities, finding distressed sellers. All of that really came from not being able to close on any deals on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your business model look like now as far as wholesale, fix and flips? What's that look like?
So basically wholesaling is just reaching out to people off market and trying to solve their problem, finding their pain points, solving that issue for them, and using that to negotiate a better rate and better price for the property and getting the property under contract. So that was always our plan, is to get properties under contracts. Once you do have the contract, you have multiple options there. Wholesaling was a great one. Again, I was still a student, university student. Martin had just a couple years of work experience. So it's not like we had a lot of money to just start buying a lot of properties. And wholesaling was a great way for us to start getting some funds, getting some substantial cash so we can put in down payments and buy more properties. So we started by putting in letters. We drove around trying to find properties that look a little like they need some work, they need some love. And then we would write. I used to write it myself, handwritten letter, saying, "Hey, we're interested in buying your property. We could potentially buy if cash if it needs repairs, if it needs work. We don't mind that either." And then we'll send out the letter. People would call us, and then we'll negotiate with them, try to get the best price possible, and then we'll put it in a contract. Now, once we do have that contract, we have the option of wholesaling, which is one of our active businesses that we've set up. And wholesaling is basically we would send the information about the property and the information about our contract to a buyer's list, people who are interested in buying in the area, and we'll charge a fee on top of it for them to take over our contract and buy the property. So that's what we did with wholesaling. And we've built a team around it. We have a company that's working around it. We have marketing dollars put into it. And that's also where the Carrot website kind of helped a lot on that side. But we have other options, which is buying it ourselves, doing a joint venture partnerships with other people's money. We could, eventually buy it and put it back on the market right away if it's more of a turnkey product. We just had multiple options. So we wanted to have, the idea was really just to get properties under contract so we can have the option of doing whatever, doing what we want to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. How many contracts are you guys doing a month or in a year right now?
So the market has changed quite a bit, and it really is very market dependent. During the summer or the busiest months, the winters are a little less busy, and so depending on which market cycle we're on, that would change. I think our highest month we probably did like 5 to 6, I want to say, Martin, a month contracts.
Oh, nice.
Since we started, our wholesale revenue was around 600,000. I believe ended up being around 30 deals in total, and we flipped 2, and we closed on around 35 doors. And essentially, we started JVing again, just like how we started house hacking without knowing what that really meant. We just have FOMO about giving these deals away. We're like, why are we just giving them away? These are amazing deals.
Yeah.
And we're also in the market.
Yeah.
I keep on telling my American partners, my American, people that we go to masterminds with, I really compare our market, comparing it to Ohio. It's a great market for cash flow. It's really known historically for having very little appreciation until recent years. So most of the investors, most of the buyers we have, or most of the JV partners we have, they want multifamily buildings, right? So those are the properties that that we're getting under contract. Those are the properties that we're keeping. So for example, one of the properties was a 6-plex, purpose built, 7 meters. It was well maintained by this older couple. They literally maintained it themselves, and they were charging a very fair rent. In a B- area. So we're like, okay, we could either wholesale this or we should figure out a way to try to keep it. I went to a business school in Montreal, and most of my friends are in their late 20s. They're working mid-manager position jobs, BCG, McKinsey, business consultants. They live in places like Toronto, Montreal, where they can't really afford, to buy real estate. They don't really have the time also to learn the ins and outs of real estate investing. So they actually ended up, coming to us. They were saying, hey, I noticed that, you move out to New Brunswick, you're picking up real estate deals. they didn't even know what wholesaling was. They just knew we're like in the thick of things. We're in the thick of the real estate industry. They're like, hey, like, we'd love to partner up with you. So we just ended up getting some of my college friends that wanted to join in on some of our deals. And we're like, okay, like, what do you think of, doing this as an equity split? And obviously, because the properties that will get under contract, it will be a building equity because discounted. We'll be able to do a full BRRRR after doing the renovations, after doing the rent adjustments. We'll be able to get that equity or the down payment plus the renovation cost payback. So it ended up being we just ended up we later learned that okay, that's considered a joint venture partnership, and then we started doing that more systematically.
Okay, nice. And so one question I want to ask, and then we'll dive into JVs a little bit more, is you talked about you're focusing specifically on multifamily deals. What does your marketing look like? Like, what terms are you going after? What kind of advertising are you doing? Well, we'll save it because we're going to do a part 2 on marketing. But I'm just curious, are you guys marketing specifically for multifamily properties, or are you just going broad and then only picking those leads?
We were going broad. We're still going very broad because when it comes to wholesaling, it really depends on if the property is a good deal, whether it's a bigger multi or smaller multi. This is something that we're easily able to offload. In terms of what we're interested in, we're looking at bigger multifamily buildings. So that's the trickiest part. It's like most bigger, anything above 6 units. When you start getting into 10, 15, that's a sure thing. But anything above 6 units are mostly managed by investors that know what they're doing. It's quite a big investment for just everyday people. It's not something that everybody would just commonly purchase. It requires a lot of work, a lot of management. So usually most people who own those assets are experienced investors. So they're less likely to be in a distressed situation. And for us, our marketing is targeting people in a distressed situation. So we'll get a lot of duplexes, 3plexes, 4plexes, anything all the way to 6plex. Sometimes we'll get the occasional 8 to 10plex. But it's mostly anything higher than that are very experienced investors that want top dollar for their properties, and that will just go and list it with a realtor because they know that's the best way to get the top money for it. It gets you more visibility, and you're able to put in the price that you're looking for, and more people will put an offer on it. For us, our focus is really off-market properties. So anything that, for some reason you don't want to sell with a realtor, maybe you don't have the time to put on the market. You don't have time to clean it up, to do the renovations. You have to move out of the property within a very short period of time. You need a quick closing. You need no conditions. That's what we can provide. It obviously comes at a cost. We do have to purchase the property at a lower price because we're taking on a bigger risk, but we're able to solve a problem for the investor or the person who owns the property. So our marketing is really broad, and that's why we're able to get all these smaller plexes. For the higher plexes, it's a different strategy. We kind of have to go out of our way to find the owner, contact the owner directly, change a little bit of our message to be tailored to more investor focused. But for the majority of our marketing, we can reach to a broad audience, and we'll mostly get a feedback and a callback from people who have smaller multi-units.
And it sounds like that's working pretty well for y'all. You don't plan on changing that messaging anytime soon.
No, not for the broad message would be the same. I believe sometimes we tweak a little things here and there based on what works and what doesn't. But for that, it's working well for us so far. But when it comes to commercial properties, when it comes to, let's say, storage units, like industrial warehouses or anything above 10, 15 units, it's a different ball game. It's a different messaging, different marketing, and it's a different way to approach it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
With that being said, like essentially we have multiple different channels, right? We're going to get into it more. But like essentially how we do our direct mail up here in Canada, most other Canadian wholesalers, they will just send out, mass mailer by the zip code. Up here, we don't get, list source. We don't get pop stream. Like we essentially, it's impossible to find the ownership data. Essentially, we can't really buy list at scale. So what we started doing, we actually hired, a team of VAs to polling and making the list ourselves, right? So we check the county records manually. We also cross-reference with the city zoning map. So to answer your question, Brady, for the multifamilies, they will be zoned for R2, R2U, or R3. So we have a separate list for those, and they're literally entered manually one by one. So it's quite a tedious process. We have,
holy cow,
I think, over 150,000 entries, and they were put in one by one by our team members.
Oh my goodness. Is this something that y'all were doing yourselves? Got the process nailed down and then went out, got the VAs and said, here's the process. Follow, like you built the playbook for it essentially.
There's a lot of sleepless nights.
That was called day night. That was called day night.
That was called day night.
Oh gosh. Oh man. Where did y'all find the VAs? Who did you go through for that?
We started with Upwork. It's a great platform to just, you communicate with the virtual assistant directly and you can hire the person based on what they're presenting to you. But there's other companies that would source VAs for you that would help you through the interview process in order to get your VA, and they charge a fee for it. They charge a fee for their work. But it really depends. And again, if you're looking to just get one VA, it's probably better to just try to find, somebody on Upwork directly. But if like us, we had quite a big demand for VAs, so we hired a company to help us find unlimited amount of VAs during the year and help us through the recruitment and hiring process. So it really depends on what your needs are. There's two ways to get them.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Well, before we move on to what y'all are doing to build the buyers list, anything you want to mention on the JV side? Martin, you had mentioned, at first it sounded like friends and family, and then you sort of formalized that. Any thoughts on that?
That's okay. There's a reason why I love JVs is there is no preset structure for joint venture partnerships. It's whatever your strength, skills, and value you can add will depend on what percentage you can get. So on bigger deals, a lot of people have multiple joint venture partners. It doesn't have to be only two people, and each one of them will have a specific role. So if you have time but no money to put in, you can be the general partner, the active partner on the deal, and you will do all of the on boots on the ground work for them. So you'll make sure the property is properly managed. You'll do the asset management. You'll hire the property managers. You'll deal with the tenants, etc. And then you have somebody who doesn't necessarily have time or money, but has a lot of knowledge and skills that can be just, the deal maker, the person who will make sure that, the limited partners, the money partners, and the GP partners, which is the general partner, are doing what they're doing. They'll coach people, they'll educate them, and make sure that the investment goes well. And then you have somebody that has a specific skill, which is finding deals, and they will have a part of equity too. So their role is simply to go out there, fish for properties, contact people, do all the marketing, and then get a deal under contract. And okay, I got a deal, so I get a percentage of equity on that property, and I'm buying it with all these partners. Then you have the money partner, somebody who just has cash, no time, and no will to learn or do anything. They just want an easy, passive investment, and they'll basically, confide that money into a joint venture partnership, and they will have a percentage of equity as well. So that's what I find really cool about joint venture partnerships. Whatever you have to provide, there's value in it, and you can get a percentage of equity back based on that. But Martin, you can touch more on how we've done it if you want.
Yeah, so exactly like what Lynn was saying, finding exactly what each individual's goals and what their strengths are. That's a conversation that we have with anyone that comes to us saying that, hey, I would like to learn more about your real estate opportunities, or I would love to invest with you. We really sit down, it's an hour call with either me or Lynn or a team member to really get to know, okay, what's their goals, like how much money they have planned, what's their income level, and what are they looking to do with their money? Do they care about getting the money back ASAP? Do they want the minimum risk? If they want minimum risk and they just want a guaranteed return, or simply, put them as a private lender instead of, jumping in on the deal with them. So that's how we're able to, build these relationships beyond just our friends and family, right? So when we first started, honestly, we did a lot of, I would call them guerrilla marketing, but they were just very sketchy. I feel like we were just very desperate, or we're just, we had all the time in the world, and we were messaging people on Facebook groups, and we were sending people DMs on Instagram. But, I wasn't really spamming them. I really made sure my message was all about adding value to everyone's real estate journeys. I was essentially sharing, I wasn't trying to sell them anything. I was essentially sharing with them, hey, me and my fiance, this is what we just did. We just left Montreal, which is one of the major metropolitans, and we moved to New Brunswick to really capture their attention, because people don't do that every day. Right. We were telling them, giving them the comparison of our experience in Montreal, what the real estate opportunities look like for us in Montreal versus what we're seeing in New Brunswick. And we're sharing with them, hey, we have access to off-market opportunities. If you'd like to jump on the call, let's book a call, right? So that's kind of how we initially did it, until we build up, the content piece, which we're gonna touch on later on.
I like what y'all are saying. It's funny. You almost read my mind. I was like, these guys are really good at finding people's unique strengths and skill sets. Like that's, most people when they're talking about JVs and partnerships, it's usually like I get the lead and I'll pass it off to you. We split it, and a lot of times I don't hear the conversation go past that. But I really like how y'all are actually taking your time to sit down and get to know investors. You're building that trust, showing that you care about their goals, and then, finding out what their end game is so you can figure out how to not really best how to utilize them, but how y'all can work better together instead of just assuming what they want and saying, okay, let's do a deal. I really like that. It's a really human element. Are you asking them any questions like what is your end game, or what are you asking, like, what are your skills? What do you enjoy? What do you really want to do?
So it's very important for us to make sure that we're aligned with what their goals are, because that's how we end up working multiple times on multiple deals in the future. But basically, what we ask them is, how involved do you want to be? Do you want to take more of a like partner, like a general partner role, or are you looking for something super passive where we don't even have to ask questions? Do you want like a fixed rate of return, same amount of money in your bank account every month? Or are you okay with, investing some money, waiting out a couple months while we turn over the property and then refinance and pull your money out? Like, we're trying to see, also what the timeline is, how long you want to be included in that investment. Are you looking for like a short-term investment or more of a long-term investment? You want to hold the property for longer? Or try to see exactly what their comfort level is. Building that trust is a big part too, because at the end of the day, they don't really invest in the deal, but they invest in you more than anything. They invest because they trust you as a partner. They trust that you're going to take care of the investment, that you know what you're doing. So we ask them all of those questions to understand where they want to go. Let's say if I'm talking to you, Brady, and you tell me, okay, I have to invest this money. I want something quick. I just want like a 4 to 5 month investment, nothing more than that. Then I'll probably just do like a private lending short term on a flip, for example. If I buy a property, just need the cash to close it and to renovate it for like about 2 to 3 months while it's done. Put it back on the market right away. I can get your money out in 5 to 6 months. That's a very short-term, fixed rate of return, easy investment. Don't need to bother getting a mortgage or anything. But then if you're looking for more of okay, I want to make a monthly cash flow. I have a cash flow goal, and I want a more long-term option for my investment. Then we'll look into buying a property together, and then you'll qualify for the mortgage. We'll put in the down payment and the renovations. We'll do the work together, and we'll take over the active work part. But we'll split that cash flow year over year, every month together. So you're still making that. You're making cash flow every month. So it really depends on what the person is really looking for, and we make sure that we cover all those questions during our initial call.
So, talking about buyers, what y'all shared with me before we started the podcast, some really interesting creative things y'all are doing to find buyers. So let's talk about that. How are you finding buyers? And then maybe we can talk about after that, what are you doing to make it easier and more efficient? Because you've got some slick processes when working with buyers. How are you finding them and building that trust?
So when we first started, it was like Martin said, like very guerrilla marketing. We would just find all of the investors that we knew and go into their friends, and we would look at their friends on Facebook and on Instagram, like, okay, these are investors. Let's reach out to them and see if they would be interested in, looking into New Brunswick. Martin was actually very involved in that process. He can tell you a lot more about it, but we started by just reaching out to people. It grew very organically at first. And then we started putting actually more effort into building it. But Martin, you can touch a little more on that.
The most important step was actually to set up a Carrot site. I know we're on the Carrot, podcast, but that was like the most important part. I don't know how some wholesalers.
I didn't ask them to say this. They're not getting paid.
Yeah, we're expecting our check any second now. But essentially, we set up the Carrot website right away. We call it New Brunswick Property Deals. We also set up, there's a plugin called Proofly. So essentially, whenever someone joins, whenever someone comes on your website, we make sure there's a pop-up, right? Because that website was super new when we set it up, even though Carrot had web SEO built in. Essentially, we had no track record to prove it. So essentially, whenever we had reach out to the people the way I told you about on social media, whenever someone will come, there will be a pop-up on the webpage showing that, okay, there's actually a lot of traffic happening. And people started signing up and they're saying, okay, Joe from Montreal or Steven from Toronto just joined the buyers list. So we kind of created, this effect through Carrot.com, and we make sure that it's linked to MailChimp. So we had an integration right away. We don't have to do any, double the work. And what we started doing as well, we started creating content for ourselves. So as someone that's coming from out of province, we enter this market. We realized that there's so many people talking about, real estate investing, obviously on bigger pockets on so many platforms, but nobody was talking about New Brunswick as a market. We felt like there's a void in content, and we felt like us as investors who are interested in the market, we needed to hear from market experts. There were so many questions that were unanswered. There were so many market specific questions that we essentially had no one to ask, right? So what we did was we essentially started calling these people. We started, calling property managers, a contractor, a short-term rental Airbnb property manager, along with some seasoned investors who were like, hey, would you like to get on a call? Because we just have so many questions that we'd like to ask you. And for some of them that might be, more reputable or have more experience than others, we'll set up a Zoom call, we'll set up a recording, similar to this format. It's really nothing fancy. I also didn't really have a professional mic or lighting before. It was literally just from my computer. And we just slapped that right on YouTube. We uploaded to YouTube, hoping that it will add some value to other people who are looking in the same market.
This is all of them on the same call at once, right? Like a Zoom call or something?
They were individual
all
calls.
One by one.
Okay.
Yeah. So each video interview was literally, with someone very specific, and the questions were also very specific, right? I had some background in video editing. So back then we had obviously no deals coming in. We were just starting out. So we had all the time in the world. We would interview someone. I will edit the videos right away. I'll cut them up in 3-minute or 5-minute pieces. Just like how I'm talking about, content marketing right now. I'll break it up in just one piece, name it something very specific, with New Brunswick and also New Brunswick property deals as the, at the end of the headline, which helped with our SEO. But think about, the kind of people that's going to look up Moncton tenant regulations, New Brunswick, on a Friday night on YouTube. Those people
not the kind of video you just stumble upon.
It's very intentional, very motivated.
That's
exactly.
Okay. I love this. Sorry, I know there's much more to dive into. I have a couple questions. I don't want to lose them. I have for you. So a couple of really quick things, and then we'll move on. What was the pop-up tool you had mentioned? I feel like people want to know when it's like someone joined the buyers list that are y'all put on your Carrot site.
Proofly.io, I'm pretty sure. It's about $120 per year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen it on your website. You guys can go to their buyers website and check that out. It's New Brunswick Property Deals.ca. We'll put it in the show notes. And another thing, when you guys were messaging people on Facebook, so you were literally just like going to people that you knew were investors, friends, and looking at their, friends and saying, okay, they seem like they might be an investor. Let's just hit them up cold through Facebook Messenger.
We'll actually, go after the accounts, like the top realtors in New Brunswick. We'll go after the property managers in New Brunswick, were the HVAC companies, because those are the people, like, why would anyone follow an HVAC company in New Brunswick? Those are only the investors, right? So those are people who are active in the real estate space, were the people that might follow a top realtor in New Brunswick. Those are either aspiring realtors, new realtors, or investors. And those people are the kind of people we want get added to the buyers list. So it wasn't just, we were going after anyone or anyone in the world. We're going after very specific accounts. I actually have an Excel sheet. It's very creepy. I essentially have all their social media handles because I was doing that at first, right? But then I started getting my VAs to do that. The Excel sheet of the people who are doing things in our market, and also Canadian real estate educators and also influencers who might not be based in New Brunswick. They might be based in Ontario, which is where Toronto is based. So it's a way bigger market. That's where people are a lot more advanced in their real estate journeys. They might already have an established portfolio. Those are the people who are refinancing their primary homes and looking to buy an investment property elsewhere in Canada. So those are the people we're targeting as well.
So the messaging would look something like, hi, Brady. This is our story. We've moved from Montreal to Moncton to pursue real estate for, because there's better cash flow. There's all of those following things that we're looking into. And if you're interested in learning more, and if you'd like to join our buyers list, you can join into through this link. And then we'll have our Carrot website there, and they'll click on it. And it's super easy. Just fill in the information, press send, and we get the information directly uploaded into our MailChimp account. So people are added automatically. And if we have a property that we're sending out, we'll just send it out on MailChimp, and everybody that signed up will receive that email too. That's kind of how we started.
Okay.
We got a little more sophisticated a little later on, but that was the messaging at the beginning.
I love that. Originally when you said, yeah, we're messaging people on Messenger, I was like, oh, that does not sound scalable at all. It sounds super time consuming, but I can see it was very creative and very thoughtful. And y'all were thinking about who, not how, like who can we connect with? And it's such a good tidbit, having that personal message, because people can't not listen to story. They can't not read a story. That's a great way to start off a pitch or a message. I think that's awesome. What were you going to say, Martin?
We'll go even further.
Okay.
Martin had a genius idea one day. He was like, I'm going to create a blog post on my Carrot website, and I'm going to list every single real estate investor that's currently established that I know of in Canada that we've learned from. And he basically wrote our story. He wrote, these are the best resources in terms of learning for real estate, in terms of learning about money management, about growth, etc. And we listed a couple of them. And the greatest thing is because we tagged every single one of them. We also shared on Instagram and on Facebook. A lot of them we reshared the information. And everywhere through that blog post, we talk about New Brunswick, we talk about the cash flow, we talk about the properties and the investments. So it brought a lot of attention. There was a lot of reshares. A lot of people were like, New Brunswick. There was a lot more clicks on our videos, etc. So that was just so genius, Martin, to kind of leverage other people's networks and bring them into getting interested in New Brunswick. So that was another genius idea Martin had.
It's very cheeky as well.
Oh, yeah. One question I had was, I'm wondering if you did your keyword research before getting on the phone with people, HVAC companies, agents, etc., or if getting on the phone with them, if that was your research, to find out what people are searching online, because you had this idea, you're like, I'm going to talk to people, I'm going to interview them, I'm going to create videos, I'm going to put this content out there, like genius idea. And it's everything we teach about evergreen marketing, because it's a relatively small time investment that's going to pay off for months, years to come to create that really valuable content. And it's not guesswork, because the questions, the words are right out of their mouths. You're not just creating content from scratch, like writing a blog. So that was a long way to ask, like, was it keyword research first, or just hop on the phone with them and see what they had to talk about?
Honestly, Brady, those were just the questions we had. So, I guess we could say we've done some research, but that was really just among me and myself and Lynn. Those were just the burning questions we had. One of the top videos that pulled in the most views was actually our realtor friend who just became a realtor after 2 months. He just got his license in New Brunswick, and he was given a breakdown of a market overview of, hey, in this area you get B-class neighborhood, you have families who might want to live here. In this area, you have university students. But that's what I'm saying. Like back then on YouTube, there was nobody else talking about New Brunswick as a market. So even something super high level like that, just a market overview, a location breakdown, people were super interested to learn more, to just get a better grasp of the market as a whole. And we also talked to that particular realtor friend as well. Even though he was only in business for 2 months, his phone just couldn't stop ringing because of that one video, which was nuts. Obviously, we also have more advanced strategies and also more sophisticated questions that we had to ask other people too. So we asked a very seasoned contractor who's also an investor about duplex conversions, because that's a very popular strategy all across Canada in the more expensive markets. We also asked this short-term rental property manager about her strategies and obviously how she was able to pull through from COVID. New Brunswick was very strict. We actually locked down the entire province. So there was virtually no traveling in and out of the province. So we were so curious. We're like, okay, Sarah, how did your business survive? Like, how were your occupancy rates, and what was your ADR like during these times, right? So
it was
all of these were
It was all the questions that we had. It was all how do you make an Airbnb still work even though we're in the middle of a pandemic? How do you recover from not being able to short-term rental your property, and how do you switch over to long-term? All the questions that us as investors wanted to learn, because we were still in a learning phase. We didn't have much experience in heavy real estate like we're doing now, and we wanted to learn from experts. So we're like, we might as well learn and film it to kind of help people learn all those questions as well, and hopefully get some tractions that way and get some people interested in New Brunswick. And that's just how, that's how we started it.
I love that. Thank you all for sharing that. That is, you basically just summed up content marketing at its finest. It's honest, transparent information. You're just providing value and answering the questions that people are asking. You're getting on calls with them, having that conversation, and putting it out online so you can help educate people and share that information. And in return, you're getting the most motivated leads, the most intentional leads out there. That's great.
It's really the best way to position yourself. If you're helping people learn, if you're educating people, people will just see you as your clients will see you as a market expert, as somebody to refer to, and that's kind of how you want to position yourself. You want to make sure you can provide as much value as possible, because that's when they're interested in partnering with you. And it added so much value into our journey that it helped a lot connecting with people. We created a Calendly, so we had a Calendly link, and we had people booking calls with us constantly. It was great. We made some very interesting partnership that led to us learning other things, joining different groups, and being interested in different asset types as well. So it's just a great way to get people interested and get the conversation started.
But also at the same time, for the suppliers too, right? For our partners on the ground, our value proposition for them is, as we grow our platform, as we grow our buyers list, we essentially tell them, hey, we have all these people who are dying to see our content, who are dying to see our next video. They want to be connected. They want to build their power team out here. So whoever we get on the platform, it's a great visibility for them to be connected to more clients as well, who are coming from out of province, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And you're building that trust with your buyers. There was one thing y'all had mentioned before we hit record. Well, actually, a few days ago, you're talking about Matterport, and that's something you see. I mean, as an agent, if you're putting a house on the MLS, that's almost a standard nowadays. At least photos and videos. Talk to me about how you're using this for buyers, and like why go the extra step, and what's that doing for you using Matterport for your properties?
So a lot of our buyers were built from, again, all the strategies that we mentioned, but a lot of them were located outside of the province. So none of them was able to come here physically. And especially during COVID, we had a complete lockdown. There was literally a border from New Brunswick to every single other province. And people from other province couldn't get into New Brunswick without a real reason to go in, whether they're visiting family that is ill, or they're relocating, or there was very specific reasons. So not everybody could get into the province. So for us, it was very important that if we want to make this work for our out of province investors, we have to make sure we provide as much information on the properties as possible, and we're as transparent as possible, so they feel safe and comfortable into investing without being there physically, without seeing the property. Matterport was a great way for them to understand the space, to have an idea of like measurements. They can take measurements directly on the 3D tour. So that was the best way for us to kind of pretend it's a walkthrough, and make it as realistic as possible, and make it as easy as possible for them to know what they're purchasing. So that's why we decided to use it. It helped us at the end of the day too, because when we were getting contractor quotes, we'll just send them the Matterport. They can take their own measurements, and they can figure out, okay, this is the square footage. We're putting this much flooring. It's going to cost you this much. It was a lot easier too. It's not 100% accurate. It's still pretty accurate. So we have to budget for a little contingency there, but it helped a lot on the investor side and on the renovation side too.
Oh yeah, I mean, all that time you save by not having to do walkthroughs with contractors and send somebody out that they can take measurements just by doing that tour. That's pretty amazing.
We've actually never allowed any of our signees to tour any of the properties they purchased. That was never part of our. It was always sight unseen, but we provide literally hundreds of pictures of every single detail in the property. We'll do a video walkthrough. We'll do a Matterport. And then we'll have also our contractors tour the property as we're visiting it, with quotes, with all the information they need, the square footage, etc. So if they have any questions, they already, they have all the info. But there is an inspection clause that's allowed, which makes them feel a little more at ease too. But they physically never visited the property.
Yeah, that's wild.
And for sure. It's definitely wild. Even when we connect with other Canadian wholesalers, they have to literally schedule open house, right? Almost as if they were acting as a realtor. For us, the Matterport 2, I was always a tech geek. I was really into the latest video equipment, and I was like, oh, 3D virtual tours. Honestly, I just kind of did it almost as a hobby. I was fascinated by it. But at the same time, we're like, okay, what do we want? Being out of province buyers at one point, we wanted to see Matterport. I wanted, pictures really didn't tell a whole story at all. I had no idea what the layout was of some of these multis. A lot of these properties were actually non-conforming, meaning that, it was a single family that's forced into a 4 units. There's a lot of that happening in our market. So as investors, we wanted to be able to leverage some of these tools to provide as much transparency as possible for people who are in our position a couple of months ago, right? So it came out of a place of curiosity. We wanted to just try out the new technology, but at the same time, we really think it provided a lot of value for our investors and partners.
I think Martin also just really had fun doing it.
I still love doing it.
I mean, it sounds silly, but you can't discount that you have to bake things into the business. That's one of our core values at Carrot, is have fun and be different. It's like, you have to. Sometimes you don't need another excuse. It happens to be working out really well for y'all, but it's like, if you figure out a way to make it more fun, just do it. Who cares?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, thank y'all for sharing that. We're about out of time on this one. And so in a second here, we'll jump into part 2. So y'all can join us next week for our conversation on marketing, because y'all have, give us a teaser for what we're talking about next. Y'all have done a lot of marketing experimentation, right?
So just a teaser, we have quite a few offline and online strategies. I think, Martin, if you can give a rough number, we have tried at least 6 different offline. I want to say, was it 6, Martin?
I think
around 6 offline.
At one time it was around 6 or 7 active marketing channels that were running. Yeah.
So and we have multiple ways of tracking our numbers too. So we track all the numbers. We figure out which marketing channel converts the most leads, which one closes the most deals, and we'll share all of that with you guys on the next episode. So tune in.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, y'all, and appreciate it. Make sure to join into part 2, and we will see you next week.